Welcome back to our discussion of Barack Obama's new book, A Promised Land. This is our review of Chapter 1. If you haven't, please go back and see what we talked about before. But looking at Chapter 1, I was really struck by one thing legitimately when I first started, or when I first went through and read the chapter for the first time or listened to the chapter for the first time. I love an audiobook. I know a lot of you coaches out there are the same way. You like to rock an audiobook while you're on the road, either going to and from schools or going to and from camps or clinics. And so that's what I like to do. I like to read an audiobook on the way to work, or listen to an audiobook on the way to work, or during lunch, or any time that I have downtime. That I'm doing other things, especially like when I'm doing laundry, uniform laundry. Definitely a great time to read an audiobook. And one thing that struck me, it's probably the biggest takeaway that I had from chapter 1, and that is it's okay to not know your purpose immediately. I think so many times we want our young men to leave us and know their purpose from the moment that they leave us, be on the way, or on track to figuring out their purpose from the time that they leave us. And that's just not the case. Everybody's thought process, everybody's emotions, everybody's dreams, everybody's realities, they have different timetables. And so we have to be respectful of their timetable as a coach. And I struggle with this because I feel like I give so much of the game. And I'm not talking about the game as in the game of football or basketball or track or anything else that I've coached. I'm talking about giving away the game of life. Like, hey, here's how to cheat. Here's the cheat code to life. So you don't have to do the thing. There's a famous Jay-Z line that says, no, Hov did that, so hopefully you won't have to go through that. So for me, it's been my mission to provide young men with a better path than I had. And in listening to chapter 1, it struck me as really evident that Barack Obama did not have a path when he graduated high school. He had no clue. There's no inkling of him even understanding that politics was in his future from that early age. I do think that there was some similarities though. One, I think about me in college and doing things just for the girls. He talks about learning just enough in certain classes to be able to have great conversation with women who may or may not had an interest in him. And I can remember doing similar things. The thing that I knew, though, that he clearly didn't early on, is he didn't know his purpose as far as being a leader, being the leader of our country, and furthermore, being a leader for black and brown people, and being that figure that was going to be the symbol of achievement for black and brown people. I don't think he realized that, and quite honestly, who could? Although I knew from a very early age that I was going to coach or teach in some capacity. I've always loved education, and I've always loved educating other people, or as some people would say, I always love showing off how smart I was. I actually think, and this could be my own personal, issues, but I think that I just love teaching things to people. Some people used to think it was showing off, and I was like, no, I want to help you. I remember helping people in classes. I remember helping other players on the field. That was something that I was always good at, being able to show you on the field, on the court. I don't think there was ever a time where a coach really had an issue with me not knowing what I was doing. And I took a lot of pride in that. I always wanted to give that knowledge. So it was very different between me and our current president in that way. I did find another parallel, though, that we had in common in the fact that by the time he was going to Columbia, and at Columbia he was an older person. He wasn't your traditional 18 to 22-year-old. And I recall that because while I started college at 18, I had a 2 year lapse, and I didn't start again until I was 22, and I graduated at 24. And I remember thinking about things differently than some of my other classmates, even the ones who were like juniors and seniors. Like I could still have a good time, and I think that's where me and the former president, where we kind of diverge, is that he seemed unable to be able to have that good time and be so driven by his ambitions or his thought process. Meanwhile, I was super driven by my ambitions and thought processes, actually. But I had a good time. But the thing about it was that school didn't seem hard to me, 22 to 24, as it seemed more cumbersome at 18 to 20. And I think that's just because A, you get an appreciation for having the ability to do this, but B, I don't necessarily think that the young man's mind, and although many people come about this at a different time, I really think there's something to the development of a young man that happens a little bit later that makes things infinitely more easy once you're in your 20s when it comes to education, as it was when you were in your teens. My 2 year hiatus made me go a little bit later. Being 22 to 24, I remember my brother when he went through with his firefighter paramedics training. It was a lot later into his life than it was early in his 20s or early into his teens. It was more in his late 20s, and so I think that, and maybe even early 30s if I remember correctly. I'm not so sure, but we appreciate it. We know we began with the end in mind. And I think that's the thing, is at 22 when I went back to school, I was thinking about graduation. And I was thinking about what the next step was. I felt like I was 2 years behind where I should be. And so it was important for me to get back on the accelerator. I began with the end in mind, and it helped me be so much more laser focused that it made it easy to work through school and football and all of the other extracurricular things that I was doing. And that's something that was different for President Obama. In chapter 1, he seemed to be only focused on his studies and what he saw himself doing and how he thought about life and making a difference. But it was at that time that he began to have the wheels move about him being about change. And so to me, that was interesting on chapter 1. And his idea of every time he had an ideal of what America would be, people would show him what America really was. And I think that was something that fueled him to say, man, can I make this what I believe it can be, or is this just a pipe dream? I think we as coaches always deal with these things. We deal with, is what we do, is that a product of a dream that we have for a better future, or is it our own hubris? We can do things this way. I know I face challenges on beliefs and structures that I have, and I have to ask myself, am I doing that because I believe it's the best route for us to go, or am I doing that because of my own ego? And I like to think that I'm able to do that and come to a conclusion that I'm doing it because I feel it's the best thing for us. But when things don't go right, as a coach, you always have those second doubt. You know what I'm saying? You always have that doubt that creeps in and says, man, maybe I should second guess what I'm doing. Should I put a fail safe in? Because it's so much about wins and losses for us, I think that sometimes when we put that fail safe in place, we end up going back to it because we think it might be the quick fix, rather than sticking to what we know, or at least we feel, because we've studied it and we've been in the game long enough to know that in the long term, this is what's going to be the best for making us, making our teams, making our players the best that they can be. I think that's what President Obama did. And if he had not been so singularly focused, if he had not built that bedrock of belief in the ability to change and give and see this country achieve what had been promised, the vision that had been promised so long ago, I don't think he ever gets to the President Obama that we know now. And so it was very interesting looking at chapter 1. I look forward to going over chapter 2 with you. Please join us again. If you haven't seen our previous work, please do like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, this has been the review of chapter 1 of Barack Obama's book, A Promised Land, from a coach's perspective. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. Have a good day.